Hi, I'm here to introduce a short video series covering the information that's useful and important to know about frequency healing. Among other people, we train new home users of these technologies through to doctors and experienced energy healing practitioners. If you're interested in energy healing technologies, these videos will help you to navigate the basic issues and put you firmly in the driving seat, so you're armed with questions that can help to make your buying decisions. The intention is to cover the basics in a few short videos, and then I'll answer any questions you have. I'm also going to share one or two insights based on my personal experiences with modalities that include scanar, cosmodic, ENS, laser, infrared light, healing blankets, gongs, plasma, the Kozyrev mirror, remote healing, bioresonance diagnostics, Bowen therapy, brain training, and more. I'll explain the difference between energy healing and regeneration, and I'll also cover the issues of feedback, treatment duration, frequency of treatment, healing crises, and the potential for tolerance. Depending on your requirements, you can waste money if you need items offering broad healing effects, which is needed for chronic issues and regeneration. And so you can end up without the versatility you need. You may also miss opportunities to do a lot more for a similar or lower spend. In other cases, it may be worth spending more to get something much more powerful and flexible. I'll also make the case for the usefulness of training, especially with regards to understanding and treating chronic illnesses. The bottom line is that saving money can mean you're stuck with an option that's less flexible, which proves to be a way of spending more money in the longer term, which could be a matter of months in some cases, and I'll give a specific example of this later. So our aim is to help you analyse your options and choose the right modality for your needs, and avoid wasting money on inappropriate modalities. And when you have broader, more complex issues to deal with, to make a case for considering a device with diagnostics, or one where there's no need for diagnostics. And finally, we'll cover the advantages of combining devices for enhanced results. So the first issue is to be clear about what you want to do, or at least have a list of good questions, as good investment decisions are based on good questions. I'll provide you with some good questions, and a commentary to help you get up to speed quickly. So the first question is, what do you want to deal with? And before you go any further with a specific issue, you need to check out any potential contraindications before buying. If you just want to deal with pain, you can consider tuning forks or even a TENS machine. And who doesn't want to deal with pain? However, we don't recommend this approach or a TENS machine. This is because pain is there for a reason, to prevent additional injury. So ideally we're looking for pain results connected to rapid healing events, which is what we call energy healing. So let's jump straight in and cover the scanar, a simple energy healing device from the Russian Space Medicine Program, superficially similar to TENS. Scanar provides resonant, harmonic frequencies your body uses for healing. On top of this, scanar has a biofeedback mechanism, so it tells you when it's made a difference to the body, and it modifies the energy to copy a nerve pain impulse. More importantly, these kind of devices called electrical adaptive stimulators modify their signals as your body responds to them. This leads to three effects. It provides additional energy the body can use for healing. It supports internal coherence and communications, because lack of energy and lack of coherence or blockages are two of the main obstacles to prevent healing. And it stimulates the release of neuropeptides, the body's natural healing pharmacy. So let's draw an immediate conclusion. Resonant and harmonic frequencies our bodies recognize are important. Applying them in the right place is also important, and if we do this, we can deal with issues like injuries very rapidly. The next reason we wouldn't recommend a TENS is that not only are there no healing effects, despite using frequencies to effectively kill pain, but repeating the same message to the body also leads to tolerance. Tolerance is like saying you love a particular song, but then playing the same track in the same place every time. If you like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but it's the only track playing at your local supermarket and it keeps looping, you'll be a bit fed up of it by January. The same thing happens with the body and frequencies. So introducing variation gets better results. In fact, one of the reasons a body fails to heal on its own is because it can also build up tolerance to its own signals. As an example, with a scanar, we can sometimes get miracle healing results, where someone with an issue for decades can be healed with only a few minutes of scanar. This is likely because tolerance has set in. The nagging, ongoing pain leads to a certain amount of healing, but then it gets stuck. In this case, the provision of energy the body can use, and the improvement of communications, directing its application properly, and the production of neuropeptides means we can suddenly get the breakthrough we wanted. So tolerance is an important issue, and it's overcome by variety. Variety of frequencies, variety of signals, feedback to the body so the signals can be modified to help to reduce or eliminate tolerance, and variety of treatments, so not necessarily just treating your sore elbow every single time. An energy healing device like scanar will be less subject to tolerance. However, it will generally not produce regenerative effects, but other devices will. So why do we need regeneration, which, like energy healing, is something the body does for itself in any case? Well, if we're treating long-term, degenerative or chronic illnesses, that's when we need a regenerative device, or to visit someone who uses them. And there are a number of different types of these devices. They include the next generation devices derived from scanar. These include Cosmodic, ENS, and the latest device, ENS Plus. If energy healing means fast repair, then fast repair can leave residual effects such as scarring. And that's not good, as it introduces dysfunction, for a heart after a heart attack, for example, or simply causing energetic blockages within the body. So we define regeneration differently. It's stimulating the body's responses so it deals with an issue as if it never happened in the first place. And the effects of this can include very rapid and visible results for cosmetology, for example, so non-invasive facelifts and wrinkle removal. There are other regenerative approaches as well, all working energetically, including soft lasers and even hydrogen therapy, officially a medicine in Japan used to treat hundreds of illnesses. The next potential stumbling block is that what may have worked for someone in a certain situation may not work for others. The first question is, do we have the same problem, the same diagnosis? Is the diagnosis correct? And in any case, we're not dealing with the same body with the same priorities and root causes potentially. There are a wide range of potential energy healing modalities. These include light, sound, electrical, magnetic, and even colloidal silver and hydrogen have an energetic effect, ionic in the case of colloidal silver. The next item to consider is related to feedback, which is either active or passive, in which case we choose how to operate the equipment, or in some cases the body itself controls everything automatically. So this wide range of options can quickly become confusing, especially when we find a website with maybe 200 or 300 different options, some of which may be doing exactly the same thing, while others may be doing that thing and a lot more. The next issue to be aware of is something called a placebo effect. This means if you give a group of people a sugar pill, 30% of them will manifest a healing result. So we need to ensure that any frequency healing technology we want to apply, first of all, goes way over the placebo effect. Otherwise, it's useless to all intents and purposes. So that's the importance of the placebo effect. And the fact is that what worked for one person may not necessarily work for you. And that may also be related to the situation, where you may have one or more overlapping symptoms, but a root cause may be different. So how do we stack the odds in our favour? The first issue is, do we really know what we're dealing with? Certain issues require energy healing, so things like injuries can respond incredibly quickly to the right frequency or frequencies. But even then, there may be a chain of related events we need to work on. I'm not trying to complicate things here. It's important to understand that this kind of thing can be quite common, so we need to know about it. Other issues include the duration of treatment, or using the right energy level. So let me share a personal example here. A few years ago I heard a loud click from my back like someone clicking their fingers, and immediately felt an extremely sharp pain as I'd put my back out. So I applied Scanar over the site of the injury using sticky pads, which I put either side of the spine. I connected them to the device, which is a pocket-sized device with a lead. This one. And I was actually doing this on full power for about 20 minutes. Now full power with a Scanar is like a cattle prod. It's generally unbearable. In fact, we can do something called an energy cleanse with this, and people shout and swear and curse. But the point is that that level of energy was required in that situation to immediately switch off the pain. And it did. And 20 minutes later, after I removed the Scanar, I had no pain at all. More information about this is covered by the Healing Effects video from our course, which you'll also find free on our YouTube channel. More importantly for me, I was immediately pain-free, but what was also happening was very rapid healing. That happened first thing in the morning, and I was pain-free for the rest of the day. That night I felt a little sharp stab of pain again. I put the Scanar in again, and in the same way I treated for 20 minutes. I also kept cranking up the energy because your body gets used to it, and then I was pain-free again. I did exactly the same thing the next day, a morning and nighttime treatment of 20 minutes. And the following day I was carrying 50 to 60 kilos on my back, and I'm quite confident, because I've had back injuries before, that this issue would have put me flat on my back in great pain and great inconvenience for a week or so. So that's the importance of the level of energy that's required, as well as the type of energy. And on top of this, we also need to be able to apply things, ideally in the right place and at the right time. Now this creates issues for treatment because, for example, we know with some energy healing devices that you can over-treat with them, and if so, it will cause a healing crisis. And that means you end up with shaking, shivering, faintness or nausea. You can even get flu-like symptoms from things like gongs, for example. It's not pleasant having flu symptoms for a day or two, or even shivering, faintness and nausea for a few minutes. So it's best to avoid a healing crisis if you possibly can. And it's likely to put people off if they feel much worse after having a treatment. So you can over-treat with some devices. And in a family situation, say treating your children, you don't want them to have a healing crisis, as they may not trust you or your device to treat them again at the time they really need it, and you really can help them. Now the other thing is that everybody's body is different, and everybody's body is different every day. And this is a really important principle to understand. So for example, I treated my baby daughter with a laser for teething problems, and it took 10 seconds. However, when I treated her for a hornet sting on her finger at the age of 2, that took something like 10 minutes. So treatment is variable depending on the problem, and that creates issues for using a lot of devices, because even things like tuning forks can work brilliantly, as long as it's the right frequency, in the right place, for the right duration. But they may not instantly alleviate pain or accelerating healing in the same way as, for example, a Scanar, which has this ability to adjust the amount of energy and the signals, so we can use it to treat just the right amount of time and in just the right place. So the next issue is, how long do we use it for? This is important if everybody's body is different every day, and there are things like age-related issues involved. So this is where feedback-driven or automated options become really useful, or when we can really benefit from training and methodology to apply skill and knowledge, because energy healing is not like issuing prescriptions. We also need to be aware of issues like what are our main choices and what's the difference between them. Energy healing can be extremely rapid and efficient. As an example, I was recently told of an ENS user in Canada who treated her elderly mother who trapped her hand in a door leading to pain, swelling and bruising. The pain was gone pretty much immediately, but even the swelling and bruising was gone in around an hour with this technology. So back to regeneration. This is where diagnostics might come in with chronic illnesses, for example, because with chronic illnesses, we have a process of illness which goes through multiple stages. So if we want to deal with a degenerative issue, we need a regenerative technology. And that's a completely different category of technology from energy healing. The next issue is that effective regenerative technologies are not necessarily as good as energy healing devices for dealing with immediate pain. This is because regeneration is a deeper, slower, more progressive process than energy healing. With respect to the scanar, this applied to the next generation, which was called Cosmotic. And the result was that people were buying Cosmotics and leaving them in a drawer, because they were expecting more or less immediate effects on things like pain. So for degeneration, you need a deeper, softer, regenerative approach. And that may not be so good at dealing with instant issues like pain. So what the Russians did was to put both of these together in one device, which then had scanar and Cosmotic working simultaneously. If we wind the clock forward, Let Medical now have the fourth stage of technology, developed over 40 years of continuous application and feedback, and this is called the ENS Plus. And really, if you want to deal with a very broad range of issues, and you don't want to get into diagnostics, there are methodologies for using these devices, which is what we train people in and support, which means that, as long as the body's functional, in a very high number of cases, even issues like chronic illnesses can be dealt with extremely rapidly. And, in the vast majority of cases, we get instant improvements after one treatment. And that's important because people know that they work. And that's key for keeping up morale, momentum, and often attendance. So the other broad option is to get into diagnostics-based technology. And the diagnostics technology can then tell you what's going on with the problem. My preference in this is the clinical grade bioresonance diagnostics, which is actually attached to the body. So you've got electrodes that you're holding, and you might have earphones where subacoustic signals are being sent into the body. So that's frequencies you can't hear, but they're picking up things like viruses, parasites, bacteria and fungi, and then the counter signals are sent into the body to eliminate them. And really, to get a clinical grade device is very expensive and way beyond the means of most people. As a result, some people choose cheaper home use devices, or they go to clinics. Others choose a midpoint, which is something like ENS for home needs, and some of them begin to treat people to help others, to bring in additional income. So there are apps and much cheaper devices also available on the market that in our experience can work, but with a less powerful effect than the much more expensive, more highly tuned and more highly developed devices. So without diagnostics, you really need to have either something really relatively simple to work with, and ideally a sophisticated, highly automated home use device that will effectively talk to the body to stimulate the healing results you want, especially with regeneration. Now let's return to consider something called healing crises. Healing crises are where, for example, you could have too much scanar energy healing. And this is where you end up with these flu-like symptoms or faintness, shivering, nausea, etc. Now these can be relatively immediate effects and very, very short duration, so for just a few minutes, and then you pass through it. If you subject yourself to gongs overnight, for example, then you might have a bigger sort of detox reaction, and that can lead you to feeling really quite unwell for a day or two, with flu-like symptoms. Another way of creating healing crises is to mix up different energy healing modalities in too short a period. So we'd not recommend, for example, using your home use scanar within 24 hours of receiving Reiki or Bowen therapy, possibly even homeopathy. In that situation, the likelihood of a healing crisis is quite high. So for us, the issue is it's better to avoid them. And if they happen to you, you need to know what it is and how to deal with it, especially if you're treating other people. The third type of healing crisis is created by the correct application of a technology to tackle a degenerative situation, such as a chronic illness. And this is where a series of stages has led to a degenerative situation. And what happens is that the body tends to unwind back through those stages and eliminate the most immediate symptoms first, and then go back and repeat the symptoms of the past. In this case, it means a variety of symptoms rise to the surface to be dealt with. We need to know about this because otherwise people may think you're making their illness worse. In fact, these technologies, when applied in remission, will pretty much immediately wake up all the symptoms and get the body fighting it immediately. So if we're not careful, and ideally treating in the acute stage and informing people about it, we can get blamed for bringing someone's illness back. The other aspect of healing crises is that we need to be able to identify the difference between a normal regenerative effect and a potentially serious degeneration. This is where, if we're dealing with difficult issues, we need to have the right training and the right support. If not, there can potentially be some serious problems. We also need to be aware of issues like severe mental disturbances, for example, because if our regenerative technologies can produce healing crises in the form of short-term exacerbations, we need to be very cautious about recommending a specific approach for something like schizophrenia, for example, that really needs to be done by a skilled and trained doctor or practitioner in that situation. So how does a feedback mechanism work? In the case of Scanar, we equate this to being like a music teacher telling the body to play a note. No, play it again. No, play it again. Yes, that's right. Now play this note instead. Now that's the most basic sort of device from the Russian space medicine program, and it's stimulating responses from the cells in terms of their electrical charges and polarization. But when we get into the next stage of technologies like Cosmodic, it's got not one, but 46 simultaneous biofeedback loops. And this means it's operating down to the central nervous system level, and it's more like a conductor tuning up a whole orchestra. In this case, stimulating responses from the nerves. And as these devices get more and more sophisticated, especially when we're talking about the latest device, the ENS Plus, there's an incredibly broad range of frequencies that's played into the body, all beneficial, all harmonic. So that's another issue. If your device or technology is not harmonic and not resonant with the body, yes, you may get a detox effect or something like that, but some frequencies can actually be disruptive. So the device needs to be tuned and calibrated so it maintains its efficacy. This means a key lesson is that the right frequency or frequencies are also important. Otherwise, we may be applying a form of EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, which is actually disruptive. Examples of this are covered in various studies, including the prevalence of very rare cancers at a school where they'd put a mobile phone mast in the school grounds. So making sure we've got efficacy in terms of the frequency quality that we're putting in is important. And above all, in the absence of diagnostics, we need to apply a methodology in order to send the right frequencies at the right place and the right time. So this feature of feedback and automation is where the very latest and greatest devices are not cheap, but you're very, very unlikely to get tolerance with them. So if you want to treat a wide variety of situations, at home or as a clinician, you need to be considering a kind of device that either involves diagnostics or one designed to work with the body under your direction, where it communicates directly with the body. Or you need the training to be able to treat in the right place, at the right time, for the right duration. One feature of the ENS Plus and similar technologies is that they don't care what the mind thinks. They don't care if you're a skeptic. And according to the Russians, and our experience supports this, the reason is These devices work mind, body and spirit, as everything is connected. There are a lot of people out there who are saying, well, you've got to sort your mind out first of all, and this, that and the other. The beauty is that these devices undo injuries, illnesses and even emotional traumas, as if they never happened in the first place. If you look at our Keep Health Mastery Healing Effects video, you'll see that the technologies we specialize in can even stimulate things like bone regeneration. So if you're fortunate enough to have the funds for this in a home environment, or you want to set up a business, or you're a clinician or whatever, that's what we specialize in. And not just the electrical adaptive stimulators like Scanar and ENS, but combining them with other modalities, which are also very powerful in a home environment. All of these are more than suitable for professional clinicians and even vets and cosmetologists. But most importantly, they're simple and safe to use. And with them, you can treat a very, very wide range of issues and do it in record time. So let me give you an example of this. I treated an old lady for a leg ulcer a few years ago. That's a very painful condition. She was telling me that some of her friends had had ulcers for 10 years and they still weren't healed. And this lady was telling me that the pain was so bad she couldn't sleep at night. Now, using the particular laser we use and the first generation ENS, she immediately had pain relief. This is one of the great things about using well-chosen technologies. That person knows it's working, and the immediate effect was pain relief. In her case, she could sleep at night, but she also wanted more treatment. Now, sleeping alone supports the whole body's healing mechanisms, removes stress and all sorts of other things. But nevertheless, it took about 4.5 months for that to be fully resolved, treating about twice a week during that period. This summer I treated another lady, who was about 10 years older at the age of 89, for a leg ulcer with the ENS Plus this time and the laser. This time it took something like 2.5 weeks for the issue to be fully resolved. And in fact, from there on, her body was able to heal itself to the degree that it looked like nothing had ever happened in the first place. So she was left without scarring, and that was from a 20-minute to half-hour treatment, most days over about 2.5 weeks. Now, what we don't know is the effect of adding on even more technologies in that specific situation. We do have experience of this, but when I'm away from home without my other technologies, I have to deal with the hand portable items like the ENS Plus and the laser that can easily fit in a small bag. But in an ideal world, that lady would also be drinking hydrogen water. She'd also be inhaling hydrogen. We'd be spraying hydrogen on the skin as well. And be putting her in a healing blanket for a few minutes after each treatment to enhance it further. So the chances are that even that result of 2.5 weeks, which is fantastic, could be greatly accelerated from that point. My next point is that different energy healing technologies operate on fundamentally different principles, despite the common factor of working energetically. In the case of Cosmotic, ENS, and ENS Plus, this means we can treat as much as we want, whenever we want, and wherever we want, but not with Scanar. And treating with something like a soft laser is not automated. And in that situation, over-treatment, either in terms of duration or frequency, causes problems. Let me share an example here. If you treat with a laser, it can be very effective against pain, bacteria, and a number of other issues. So during a treatment, the pain can go from, say, 8 out of 10 to 0, like the ENS. But if you keep treating, it's as if all the treatment is undone. And in the meantime, the person receiving the treatment has relaxed and more or less forgotten about the reason they were there in the first place, which is very common. With too much laser, all the pain can return more or less instantly. Unfortunately, that also means the calibration point changed, now from 0 to suddenly 8 out of 10 again. And that means the pain may actually feel worse than before treatment. So without automation, we really need to know what we're doing, and the quantity of energy can also be important. The laser I use had a counterpart with lower energy. My laser will typically resolve quite a severe headache in about 10 minutes. But its counterpart from the same manufacturer, producing 1.2 joules of energy, instead of 7.5, will take 6 times as long. So do you really want to spend an hour or more treating something relatively simple like a headache? For me, that's not very practical, and being impatient, I want quick and effective results. So frequency healing can work, and it does for probably millions of people, but we need to choose the right modality or the right frequency for the particular problem. Ideally, something offering broad spectrum harmonics. And that means we really need to know what the problem is, and potentially other drag factors on the body. And this leads us potentially down the route of diagnostics. But if not, we can use devices like the ENS Plus that don't rely on diagnostics and instead just talk directly to the body. So it switched itself on. And now it's treating the body automatically. Now, if that's the case, we only need to know how to apply them. So, we should know about chronic illnesses. We should know about healing crises, the importance of feedback, the importance of using the right frequency or frequencies, and preferably the broadest range possible. We should know about duration of treatment. We should know not to overtreat with some devices because at the very least people can get healing crises, and the treatment can be cancelled out with others. And ideally we also need to consider that in certain situations, involving extreme pain for example, then the quantity of energy can also be important. So these items are all useful to be aware of before we go out spending our money. And it's important also to check on the training and advice, which is what we offer based on decades of experience. There's nothing more frustrating than spending your hard-earned money and finding you're struggling to use your equipment because the instructions are written like a Japanese VCR manual. We've heard a few stories about that kind of thing. So let's return to price. In fact, I think it's sensible to look at this in terms of value, effectiveness, and range of application, as well as price. So that means what your modality can do, and over what period of time. When considering the price of something, it's important to think about whether it has a good chance of doing what you want it to do. More than that, it's also sensible to consider the cost of training, support and upgrades, and to look at it as an investment. And this is critical. Consider price to value over a period of time, say 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years even. When we do this, we can sometimes find a very different picture. As an example, you can get results from patches, including stem cell stimulation, glutathione stimulation, carnosine stimulation, alanine stimulation, and effects on mood, stress, youthfulness of skin, and many more effects. The cost of a set of patches is around $150 for a month. Now the recommendation is to use them for at least 3 months. And many people are using 3 or more sets. So that works out at $5,400 a year on disposable items, assuming you're only using 3 sets of patches. Even slightly longer-term price-to-benefit considerations make a strong case for something that can treat a much wider variety of issues, and when used correctly, stimulate the same kind of effects, and with no limits on use, which can give you years of service, and produce quicker results, and in some cases employ automated feedback. So when it comes to electrical technology, why do we favour the Russian technology? Well, this is the gold standard. Their technologies were developed over 40 years ago, at the cost of $100 million, employing 1,000 of their best doctors, scientists, biophysicists and engineers over a 10-year period. That's 10,000 years of elite intellectual development. But only 3 products were developed: bioresonance diagnostics, healing blankets, and the electrical adaptive stimulators, including Scanar, and later Cosmodic, ENS, and ENS+. So this is what a lot of other companies are now copying, especially bioresonance diagnostics, which seems to be the latest big thing, but without 40 years of development behind them. In the case of the ENS, it's the only device I know of that is so super highly tuned, with such incredibly broad frequencies, and with such fine tolerances, that it has to be built in a satellite factory. But what we get from it is the kind of regenerative effects like bone regeneration after osteomyelitis that I've seen from no other devices, and no need for diagnostics. So in conclusion, we need to know about things like healing crises, tolerance, regeneration, degenerations. If not, we can cause problems, waste money, or encounter frustration. So hopefully, being better armed with deeper insights and better questions, you'll have some powerful ideas on how to save money, and better direct it to get the results you want. In some cases, even if it means going to a practitioner instead of buying equipment yourself. As a final tip, if you have a particular type of modality in mind, ask practitioners who've used the technologies you're considering to share their experiences before you choose. For example, you may be interested in low-cost bioresonance. Check out what's included, upgrade options, initial costs, and ongoing subscriptions. People are happy to share. In fact, if anything, they can be so happy to share that they can inadvertently overstep the limits of their knowledge or experience. So ask direct questions and be aware of the difference between clinicians and practitioners who get experience treating hundreds of people, as opposed to home healers who may not have so much experience or training. And I think as an aside, when we look at the bioresonance diagnostics, I know clinicians who've got a dozen different bioresonance diagnostics machines costing hundreds of thousands of pounds. So also check out the automated non-diagnostic options. So here's a checklist that may be useful to summarize these points. Check out the contraindications of any modality you're interested in. Do you want something for a particular issue? If so, will it do the job? Can it offer results well above placebo effects of 30% or so? Do you want something more general as a healing modality with wide applications? Do you want something that offers energy healing? Or are your requirements best met by a device offering both energy healing and regeneration? Are there hidden costs, upgrades, subscriptions, training or support? What's the quality of training and support? Will you get personal attention fast when you need it? Will it cover issues like frequency of application, potential for tolerance, healing crises, regeneration and degeneration? Will it work automatically, or does it need user skill and knowledge to know when to stop, for example? Are you clear about what you can use it for and what you can't use it for? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this approach versus other options? And will the all-in cost fit your budget? So is your budget sensible for what you want to do? Or might you be better off visiting a clinician or considering other equipment instead? What are the broad differences between the option you're considering and other options? What pros and cons should you consider? What are the experiences of other users, ideally ones who've been treating a wide variety of complaints for a long time, so a lot of people? And finally, if the people you're consulting can't answer questions about healing crises, tolerance, and the other issues we've covered here, do they know enough to provide reliable advice for your situation? If you want more information, if you want to talk or you have further questions, feel free to email us via our website or post your questions under any of our videos on the YouTube Keep Health Research channel. We're here to help. Thank you for watching.